Let's look at economics as a science. Economics as a science. If you look at some of those definitions we have actually provided over time, we have been able to revert to economics as a science, though there are discrepancies as regards whether economics is a science or a social science, because in one definition we refer to economics as a social science, whereas in other definition economics was mainly conceived as a science. So there is a need to look at the clear-cut demarcations as regards the views being expressed by economists in terms of economics being seen as either a science or a social science. But in this particular case, we want to look at economics as a science. When we talk about science, simply put, science is a knowledge that is being arranged in an orderly manner. So any knowledge that is arranged in an orderly manner is purely regarded as a science. So can we now take economics to be a knowledge that is being arranged in an orderly manner before we can simply refer to it as a science? So basically, economics is a science, and the reason why economics is regarded as a science is because of its fundamental objective, which is to establish valid generalization about the principles underlying the choice which people make in respect of the use of the available scarce resources. Here, when we refer to economics as a science, the reason for this is majorly centered on the fundamental objective, and the fundamental objective of economics is to establish a valid generalization about the principles that underlie the choice which people have to make in respect of the use of the available scarce resources. It is important to note here that one of the major or one of the fundamental principles upon which economics is based is that of the allocation of the scarce resources, and it is generally believed that resources are relatively scarce, and as a matter of fact, what majorly informs the study of economics is how to apply the appropriate principles of economics on how to achieve effective and efficient allocation of the available scarce resources. This therefore implies that if resources were not scarce in the first instance, then there wouldn't have been need for the study of economics. Therefore, the need for the study of economics mainly arises from the use of the scarce resources to achieve certain economic benefit. So economics is purely centered on the fundamental objective, which is to establish the valid generalization about the principle that underlies the choice which people have to make in respect to the use of the available scarce resources. And based on this, we refer to economics as a science. Apart from that, it will be easier to predict the outcomes of people's behavior as well as formulate appropriate policies to bring about the desired outcomes, which means that in an attempt to forecast or to predict the outcomes of people's behavior using appropriate economic principles and other techniques, as well as developing appropriate measures on how to formulate policies in order to achieve the desired macroeconomic goals and objectives, also makes economics to be regarded as a science. However, economics is more appropriately referred to as a social science in the sense that it mainly studies how people behave as different from the study of an inanimate matter, which is the province of physical or pure science, such as the physics or chemistry. So from this, we have been able to draw the clear-cut demarcations of economics being regarded as a science on one hand and as a social science on the other hand. It must be noted here that those who have regarded economics as a science, they have never made mistake. And also, those economists or scholars who have equally regarded economics as a social science have equally done so based on their individual perspective economic experience, and other ideological orientations. Therefore, it now depends on the extreme that an individual economist actually belongs in terms of economics being conceived as a science or social science as the case may be. So we can revert to economics as a science because of the fact that it has a fundamental objective which is basically designed to establish the valid generalization about the principle underlying the choice that people make in respect of the use or allocation of the available resources. Apart from this, we can also revert to economics as a science due to the fact that it is relatively easier to forecast or predict the outcomes of the behavior of individuals as well as formulating appropriate policies that can really help individuals to achieve their targets or to achieve economic benefit for the society as a whole. All these are some of the major reasons why we have regarded economics as a science. Apart from that, we can also see economics as a social science more appropriately in the sense that economics mainly studies how people behave or react to different situations at a particular period of time. It could be in the market or industry as the case may be. So the way and manner individuals are able to perceive a particular concept or a situation arising within a particular period of time also makes economics to be regarded as a social science because at that point in time the individual's behavior are actually being studied, and as a result we can always predict or study how people will behave or react to a particular situation over a period of time. So in this case, we can revert to economics as a social science. And meanwhile, we should also be able to bring out the significant differences of economics being regarded as a social science and not physical or pure science. If it is physical or pure science, we are talking about inanimate objects or inanimate matter. And whereas the study of economics does not cover inanimate objects or inanimate matter. Rather, the study of economics is purely centered on the behavior of an individual within a particular society. And that's what makes economics to be regarded as a social science. So in summary, economics can be seen as a science on one hand, and we can also revert to economics as a social science on the other hand. It actually depends on the school of thought that an individual economist actually belongs at a particular period of time. Then let's look at positive and normative economics. We have what we call branches of economics. Branches of economics. Though there are different branches of economics, we have the microeconomics, we have the macroeconomics, we have development economics, we have business economics. Apart from that, we have the positive economics, and we have what we call normative economics. These are various branches of economics in the economic literature. But as far as this particular forum or this session is concerned, we are going to be limited to the positive and normative economics. So let's begin with positive economics. When we talk about a positive economics, we simply refer to that as a branch of economics that is purely concerned about what economics actually is. In other words, a branch of economics that merely talks about what exactly economics is what we simply refer to as a positive economics. It could also mean what is happening or what will happen at a particular period of time. So it's a value free, hence it is an objective science. So in positive economics, we have a number of problems that have been identified, and as a matter of fact, certain predictions are being made on the basis of the facts that are being observed by individuals. So simply put, positive scientific knowledge that enables individuals to predict the consequences of a possible course of action is considered to be desirable in relation to positive economics. So in summary, when we talk about positive economics, we are mainly concerned about what exactly economics is. What exactly economics is. That is what we mean by a positive economics. That is, it is a branch of economics that mainly talks about what economics exactly is. And that is what we call a positive economics on one hand. On the other hand, we have the normative economics. And when we talk about normative economics, we refer to this as a branch of economics that basically deals with what economics ought to be. That is one of the major distinguishing features of normative economics. That is, it is centered on what economics ought to be or what should happen at a particular period of time. Therefore, normative economics is not value-free. As a result, it is regarded as a subjective science. In other words, normative economics makes a value judgment about what economics should be. For instance, the statement that says subsidy should be paid to corn farmers in order to increase output is regarded to be normative in this particular instance. So what mainly differentiates positive economics from normative economics is the fact that the positive aspect of economics simply tell us exactly what economics is. That is, it is value free, and as a matter of fact, it is an objective science. However, the normative economics simply tells us what economics ought to be. Therefore, we can simply put it that it is purely based on value judgments about what economics is expected to be at a given period of time. Therefore, we can put it that normative economics is a subjective science. So that is what mainly differentiates the positive economics from normative economics. So let's look at the basic concept of economics. We have the basic concept of economics. When we talk about the basic concept of economics, we are talking about various conceptual issues that mainly underline the subject matter of economics. And if you look at the definition provided by Professor Lionel Robbins, that is in respect of scarcity definition category, he was able to define economics as a social science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. You will recall that I told us that this particular definition, as made available by Professor Lionel Robbins, was generally acceptable. The reason for this is not far-fetched, and that was purely centered on the fact that the definition basically contains a number of basic elements or basic concepts that characterize the subject matter of economics. So based on the definition as provided by Lionel Robbins, we can be able to bring out a number of concepts that are said to be underlining economics as a study. We have the scarcity, or we have the want, we have the scarcity, we have the choice, we have the scale of preference, and we have the opportunity cost. So all these are the basic concepts that form the subject matter of economics. So let's look at this one after the other and see how they have played significant role in understanding the definition of economics. So we are starting with scarcity. When we talk about scarcity in economics, scarcity simply means limited in supply. And the concept of scarcity is basically used to describe the situation that arises when limited resources are not enough to satisfy unlimited human wants. In other words, by scarcity, we are talking about the use of the resources which are expected to facilitate and meet the needs and wants of the individual. And these resources, it must be noted, are relatively scarce, whereas human wants are unlimited. So we have unlimited human wants, then we have the limited resources. How do we then break or bridge the gap between these limited resources and unlimited wants? So that is what informed the significance of the study of economics. So at this point in time, there is a need to apply the economic principles on how to bridge the gap between the limited resources and unlimited human wants. So simply put, in economics, scarcity simply implies limited in supply. And when we talk about limited in supply, we are majorly talking about the resources that are being used or allocated in order to facilitate the direct production process of goods and services within a particular period of time. So scarcity is just a concept of economics that simply denotes, limited in the use of the available resources to facilitate the production process. So apart from scarcity, we have what we call choice. Don't forget the fact that economics is also considered to be significant because of the fact that there is a need for appropriate choice to be made. And when we talk about choice, choice has to do with the act of picking from the alternatives. The act of picking from the alternatives. That's a simple meaning or definition of choice as a basic concept of economics. Since in any given society, the available resources are not enough to produce all goods and services that are required for complete satisfaction of numerous wants, therefore, choices must be made regarding what goods and services to produce, how much to produce, for whom to produce, and so on and so forth. Therefore, an individual consumer must choose among the types of goods and services and between present and future consumption because of his limited money income. So what we need to do here is just to ensure that we are able to apply the appropriate economic principles in order to pick from the alternatives. When we talk about picking from the alternatives, we are talking about a number of goods and services that are required by individuals in order to meet their total satisfaction. It is important to note that all the goods and services cannot be produced, or all the human wants cannot be fully satisfied. So there is a need to choose from those goods and services or from those wants, those that are considered to be important at that material time, so as to be able to go for them and leave those ones that are less important. And when we talk about choice too, this is also expected to lead us to another concept, which is called the scale of preference. And there is a clear-cut, or there is a significant relationship between the choice and scale of preference. So there is a need to choose or pick from the available items such that we'll be able to ration based on the available resources, which eventually will really help us to maximize our welfare or utility from the consumption process of goods and services. So generally put, every individual is actually faced with budget constraints or limited money income. Therefore, the available money income must actually purchase a number of goods and services, and these goods and services must also be needed by individual at a particular period of time. So in any given society, the available resources are not enough. The available resources cannot go round in producing the goods and services which are needed for complete satisfaction of numerous wants. And that is what informs the choice. And that's why they say that in economics, choice arises as a result of the scarcity of resources. Choice arises as a result of the scarcity of resources. That is, why do we have the emergence of choice? It is due to the fact that the resources are relatively scarce. So since resources are relatively scarce, there is a need to choose appropriately from what is available so that at the end of the day, an average